Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Main Street Finance Podcast. I'm, of course, Alex, your host, and today we're going to play part 2 of my interview with Colley Bailey, who is a licensed real estate agent in my area. If anyone has any suggestions or requests of other financial professionals that you'd like me to interview, you're always welcome to either shoot me an email or a tweet. And I actually just confirmed today that I will be interviewing a mortgage loan officer next week. So that episode will be posted probably the week after or potentially 2 weeks after. So if you have any questions that you'd specifically like me to ask him, feel free to shoot me a tweet or an email with your questions, and I'll be sure to put them on the list. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let myself continue the interview. So we talked about the process of buying and a little bit of selling. How long does it take to buy or sell a house? Does it vary depending on the market?
Yeah, and it varies depending on the property, right? So if you're buying a new construction home, you're buying a huge, nice custom home, it could take a year to build it. Right? That's kind of the long end of the spectrum. Typically, it's about a 30-day process from contract to closing on a normal residential transaction. Again, unless it's something like new construction or if it's a property that needs to be renovated before you buy, those could extend out for months as well. So,
and I imagine that's highly dependent on like region or like your local market.
Yeah. Well, and especially selling a property, that's dependent on how many buyers are in the market, you know, the speed of the market, the month supply, like we were talking about before. There's a little more variation in that. That's really market dependent on, you know, average days on market. I mean, that's a metric that we can track for listings.
Gotcha. Now, let me ask you this: if you're not a real estate savvy person and you're not sure, you know, oh, it might take forever to sell my house, or oh my god, and he just said it varies so much depending on where you are there sort of a series of, let's say, real estate professionals that they could go to and kind of get a better idea?
I would contact your local realtor.
Yes. Okay. So wait, you're one of those.
Yes, that would be me.
Well, okay, as long as we got that straight. Local realtor. So we already talked about buying, selling, the processes of both, a local professional that you could potentially reach out to. So if you're someone who's selling their house, obviously you're selling your house because you probably need somewhere else to live. So which do you think should come first? Maybe finding the house you're going to move into, or maybe selling yours? Like how should that priority work?
A lot of that is going to depend on whether you're in a seller's market or a buyer's market. See, it's all starting to come together now. Okay, so because if you have more advantage as a seller, right? So if you have tons of buyers, maybe one of the things that you throw back in negotiations is, well, we would really like a 60-day close. So whichever buyer is able to accommodate that, they're gonna have more weight in our negotiations, right? So, in what you would do is you could put it under contract and make that contract contingent upon you finding your next place and being able to close at the same time, right? So it's something that binds that contract. And now you also can do that as a buyer as well. So you could go try to buy and put an offer on a property and then make that contract contingent upon selling your current house, right? But the problem is, if you're in a seller's market, that's a really weak offer, right? So if you have any other buyers that are offering on that, they're probably going to beat you out because a lot of those sellers won't want to wait and see just if you maybe can sell your house.
Yeah, it's just one more thing they got to worry about.
Yeah, it's just one more thing they got to worry about. Another thing to think about is how much it would cost to sell your house and then rent in the interim. Because if you sell your house and you rent, and if you can get a short-term rental, or even if you can factor in how much it would cost to break a lease, and if the numbers still make sense, sometimes it makes sense to do that because it gives you strength as a seller, because you can work with any buyer's situation, but then it also gives you a lot of strength as a buyer because you can wait for the right property to come in. You're not rushing, to meet a quick 30 or 45-day close, and just having to take whatever's in the market, just happens to be in the market at that time. you can actually wait until you find the right thing. And then hopefully you're sitting on some equity from that first property, and you can have a large down payment on that next one that you're going to.
All right, and then by equity, you just mean...
So equity is the difference between what a property is worth and how much you owe on it.
Gotcha. So like you sold your house for $200,000, but you had maybe $150,000 mortgage on it, so you ended up with $50,000 cash, and that's your equity.
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Minus closing cost, commissions, and all of that. But
pile of cash.
The pile of cash that you have left. Yes.
The pot of gold.
Yes. But the rental. I want to go back to that real quick because the rental thing is something a lot of people don't consider, but it can give you a lot of flexibility. The downside is that you have to move twice. so that's the downside. Also, the potential of having to pay extra to break a lease, but it gives you so much flexibility and it takes a lot of stress away from the transactions. Because you can actually have each of those transactions just as a sell and then just as a buy.
Makes sense. You're not trying to coordinate
right.
two moving targets at the same time.
Yeah. And I especially recommend that if you're trying to buy new construction. Because a lot of times builders are really hesitant to invest thousands of dollars on their bill to build a house and do all the work that it takes to build a house if they're not sure that your property is going to be able to get sold. So it's really helpful in new construction space.
And then if you're buying, is there a certain number or just is there a number of houses that you should see before making an offer?
I don't think there's a specific number. I think what's important is to know your criteria so that you can actually identify, yes, this is a fit, no, that's not a fit. Also, on my site, if you go to the buyer's guide page, you can get a strategy packet. And in there, I've actually got a list of, it's actually a graph where you can rate different properties. You can rate 3 properties side by side on all these different factors and actually get a numerical score at the bottom. So you can know, yes, this one matches so much more my criteria than these other ones. I highly recommend people do that. Most of the time people don't do that. Most of the time it's more of an emotional decision. People will walk in and say, oh, we love it. This is the one, you know. And that's fine. That's fine too, because that's where you're going to live. And that's as long as it meets the lifestyle that you want to live, that's the one that you should buy.
So if you walk in, the first house you see, and it checks all your boxes, because you sat down, you have your strategy that I want a paved driveway, 3-car garage, facing the mountains. If first house you see checks every box.
Yep.
There's no shame in just going ahead and putting in an offer?
I don't think so. I think if you've pre-qualified and you know you can afford it, and you've checked that payment and that fits within your budget, and this is, something you're really good at is helping people understand their budgeting. As long as you know that you're happy with that, and it fits, like you said, it fits all the boxes, checks all those boxes. I don't think there's any shame in doing that, especially in a really fast moving seller's market, because it won't be there for very long. So
you get to end up on the wrong side of these multiple offer situations.
So when you do find the right one, speed becomes really important. Speed's not as important when you're developing your criteria, when you're getting the pre-qualification, when you're, sort of scanning the market. Take your time on all that. Get comfortable with the process. But when you find the right house, that's when you got to act quickly.
And then talking about putting in offers, a term I see a lot when I was doing a little bit of research for this episode is earnest money. So what is that?
Earnest money is a good faith deposit that says, we really want the property, so much so that we're going to put money on the table. And typically it's a check that's going to get delivered to a title company. You're going to have a third party who holds that money for you, or an escrow company that holds that money for you. It gets distributed at closing. So it's a credit toward the purchase at closing.
So it's sort of putting some weight behind your words.
Right.
Like, I'm going to buy this house for $200,000. Here's the first 5. But you're not giving it directly to the seller. You're giving it to an escrow company in case the deal just falls through or they pick another offer.
Right.
It just comes back to you.
Yeah, and so in certain circumstances, you can lose the earnest money. Like if you don't fulfill all the obligations in the contract and you decide not to purchase, you can lose that money, right? So it's not just it is skin in the game. It's not just hey, here's an early down payment. It's skin in the game that you're going to fulfill the transaction.
So sort of like I'm going to buy this house for $200,000 to show you I'm serious. Here's $5,000. But if I don't like the paint color and decide I don't want it, they get to keep that $5,000.
Right. Now, but as a buyer, the property has to meet your in Arkansas anyway. I'm sure this is a national podcast, but
international
podcast. Depending on the state you're in and the contract that you signed, you do have certain obligations that the property has to meet and that the seller has to meet, or you can cancel and get your earnest money back. A lot of times this will be things like your loan has to get funded, the inspection has to meet your standards, or they have to repair the property to the point that you're happy with it.
So essentially, you're putting in that good faith deposit of here's this $5,000, but then you find out the basement's flooded, or all the electrical's terrible, or just there's something hidden that you didn't know at the time. You can get that money back, no problem.
Right.
Or say your loan gets pulled and the bank decides, hey, we're just not going to do this loan anymore. You can still get that money back.
Right.
And is that something that's...
Depending on the contract.
That's exactly where I was going. And
depending on the contract. So this is why you need an agent that will explain the contract to you, and so that you're comfortable and you understand all of those terms and obligations before you, as you're putting the offer in, right? You need to understand that before you sign it.
So... do you mean to tell me that these are a set of terms and conditions that are designed to help you?
In most cases.
Because usually you're just hitting that checkbox and moving on to whatever software it is. So is this one of those cases where the fine prints can save you?
Yeah.
At least that $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
So, Colley, we've gotten our real estate agent. We've put in our offer. We've gone through the process, or at least a good bit of the process. You had mentioned something about an inspection earlier. What is an inspection, and why should you get one?
I highly recommend you get an inspection on every property that you buy, every home that you buy. This is where you're going to hire a licensed home inspector to come in, and they're going to look at the systems of the home. They're going to check the roof. They're going to check the foundation. They're going to check the plumbing and the electrical and the air conditioning system. And they're going to see, and the water heater and all this stuff. And they're going to see if anything is in disrepair, if anything needs to be replaced or updated, and they're going to make recommendations. You will get a report back. Usually it's 30 or 40 pages long, even on a house that doesn't have a lot of problems. So the important thing with the inspection is that you look through that and you make sure that you're happy with the state of the house. And if not, you and your agent need to send in a list of repairs that need to be done before you're willing to close on the property.
So, 2 comments. First, it's sort of like you put in that $5,000 of earnest money. You are now getting farther along the process. You get the inspection comes back and finds that the basement's flooded. Instead of just saying we're done, this is a chance where you can tell the sellers, hey, I need you to fix this, or we don't have a deal. So it's sort of like that.
Right.
And then the second comment is getting a home inspection is a lot like having your mother-in-law come visit. She's going to inspect every little thing about that house.
Right.
And if there's a problem or a perceived problem,
right,
you're going to find out about it.
Usually. Not that an inspector couldn't miss something. I mean, that's possible. But most of the time, they're going through it with a pretty fine-tooth comb, and they're going to find most of the issues that you're going to want to know about.
Bare minimum, they're going to notice the big stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Going along with that, what would be what is the final walkthrough, and what does that entail?
So the final walkthrough is your chance to make sure that everything that you had wanted to get done is done on the property, and to make sure that the property's in the same condition or a better condition than what you had gone under contract with, right? So it's still the same house, nothing bad has happened to the house, and again, if there were repairs that needed to get done, they had gotten done by that point. And typically, the final walkthrough is going to happen, a day before closing or the morning before closing or something. Sometimes they get pushed back, but yeah, we typically like them to be a day or two before closing.
And just in review, the closing is where everyone comes together, all the money changes hands, and you get the keys?
Right.
Gotcha. All right, and Coley, I got to tell you, that's the end of the questions that I prepared. However, on the Twitter page, I went ahead and I had asked, before this interview had happened, if anyone had any questions that they would like me to ask our real estate professional here. And I did get a couple questions, so we're going to move on to those. So one of the questions we had gotten on Twitter is, and this is a very loose answer, I can imagine, is buying always better than renting?
Short answer is no. As a real estate agent, I'd love to tell you, yes, buy a house. Everybody should buy a house right now, today. But that's not actually true. You really need to think about, first of all, how long you're going to be in that area. Okay? Because typically, if you're not putting down a large down payment, and let's say you're in an area for only maybe a year, okay? Well, most likely property values haven't gone up so much in a year that all the commissions and closing costs and everything involved in that transaction, your property probably hasn't appreciated so much that it eats all of those costs. Does that make sense? So when you sell it,
so the potential earnings of buying a house,
right,
it appreciates in value, you sell for a profit. Those earnings might not necessarily pay for hiring an agent twice, closing costs twice, listing costs, all the costs and whatnot that go into buying and selling a house.
Yeah. So because if you have to turn around and sell it quickly, you probably are going to lose money on it. It's probably going to cost you money to sell the property. And so that might not be the best financial choice for you. Also, you need to think about how much flexibility you might need in your life, right? So some people travel all the time for work, and maintaining a home is labor intensive, or at least money intensive. So you've got to think about how long you're going to be there, and you need to think about whether you can stay in one place and maintain that property while you're there. Otherwise, it probably makes more sense to rent, because you don't have the maintenance costs. You can up and move and go wherever, and it's on the landlord at that point.
Alrighty. Do prices of homes in your area matter between the renting versus buying equation?
Absolutely. Yeah. In most places, it is, and I say most places, let's say in middle America, let's kind of exclude the coast, it's cheaper to own than to rent if you're just looking at payments, okay? And also because you get a lot of perks for owning, right? So you get a tax break for being a homeowner. You also get to sort of treat your house like a savings account that you get to sleep in. It's sort of a forced savings account because every month you're paying down principal on your loan, and that gets stored as equity in the property. So when you do eventually sell the property, you get to recoup that money that you've paid down in the principal, and typically the home has appreciated at that point, so it's worth more than when you bought it. Again, that's market dependent. But if that's the case, then it's sort of a savings account that also grows in value the longer that you have it. When you factor that in to the fact that when you're renting, you're also paying a mortgage. You're just paying the landlord's mortgage. And then when you move, if they decide to sell the property, they cash out on all the equity that you gave them, right? So that you've built for them. Essentially, that money is lost to you. So you got to look at how much it would cost for you to own a home and how much it costs you to rent. So let's say it cost $2,000 to own the cheapest home wherever you live, but you could rent for $500. Actually, it would be cheaper to rent, right? Because it would be probably the best idea to rent and then have a savings account and put
right.
put $1,500 in a savings account and treat it that way, because then you're not paying property taxes, you're not paying the interest, you're not paying the maintenance costs that go along with the property ownership. But those numbers that's pretty unrealistic, typically.
But it proves the point.
But that proves the point. So then you have to work the math the other way. Let's say it costs $2,000 to rent, but you could buy a house and have a payment that was $500. I don't know where you could do that realistically, but in that case, it definitely makes sense to buy. So typically, it's a little closer together. Typically, in our area, it might be $1,300 to rent a house, but you could actually own that house and pay a $1,100 a month mortgage, something like that.
Yeah, and actually, a real life example for those of y'all that are still watching. I actually rent. I had mentioned at the beginning of the video that Colley actually sold me my house that we have sequestered a bedroom in. So if y'all want some real numbers, when I was renting a 3-bedroom, 2-bath duplex, like half of a duplex, and that was costing me just shy of $800 a month. But when I bought a house and all in principal, interest, mortgage, taxes, it comes out to just shy of $1,100 a month. Now, it was, in my case, a little bit more expensive to have a house, but I don't have a typical 30-year mortgage. I actually went ahead and I got a 20-year mortgage, which means I pay off the loan sooner, and to pay off the loan sooner, you got to pay more each month. Now, had I gone with a traditional 30-year mortgage, that would have put me at, I want to say it was about $850 a month. So in our area, it was actually pretty even renting versus buying. But I'm in a big house and not half of a duplex.
Right.
So for me, that extra $200 is worth it.
Right.
Plus, of that, another thing you got to factor in is I'm paying $1,100 now versus the $800 I was. But of that $1,100, $400 goes towards paying down the loan.
Right.
So if you factor that out of it, I'm making money by having the house. So, real life example for the two of you still watching.
And both of you better click the like button. That's coming from me.
So another question we had on Twitter is it worth moving if you can find a state with lower property taxes?
I would just say you have to do the math, because it depends on what your job is and whether you're going to get paid the same in that state. I mean, if you have a technical job or maybe, a freelance job or something like that you can do from home, and you're all digital, and you get, you think you can make the same money there, then sure, yeah, save money on your property taxes. But also, some states with lower property taxes have higher property values, so it's going to be a wash. So you just have to do the math.
Yeah, so just not just property taxes, but sales taxes, income taxes. Yeah. You got to kind of look at all of it together.
Absolutely.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I think the only way you can really answer that question is to know how much you make, how much you would expect to make in the new place. I would break it out to a year almost and say, in a year, how much would this be? And then you really need to also account for all the different types of taxation, not just property taxes, but like you said, income taxes, sales taxes, everything. And you really have to look at how the property would fit into your budget. That would take a lot of work to really know.
But in short, it probably shouldn't be the only thing you look at.
That shouldn't be the only thing you look at, no.
Another question we had from Twitter is, what would be, in your experience, the thing that most people either get wrong about the home buying process or just don't know?
I think they rush into it. I think they skip the first few steps of the 6 C's. Getting the credit lined out, getting your buying power, your pre-qualification in place, in hand, knowing exactly this is my budget, this is how it fits in my budget. Really get that price range narrow. And that cuts out hundreds of properties that you no longer have to look at. That saves you the most time. The second thing is going deep into your criteria and why you want those criteria. Because if you just open up Zillow and start looking through 2,000 properties, you're almost wasting your time. because you're not going to buy 2,000 properties. You need one property. And it's more of a game of elimination than addition. You don't need more properties to look at. You need fewer properties to look at because you're only buying one. So get very clear on your price range, get very clear on your criteria, and it eliminates a lot of clutter. And it will allow you to buy faster and with more confidence.
Well, alrighty then. And the last question we have before we go ahead and conclude this is, what kind of resources are available for first-time home buyers?
There are a lot of resources available, especially when it comes to mortgages, things like that. There are down payment assistance programs that different states do. There are government programs to buy in rural areas. If you're a veteran, fantastic loan program for VA purchases. There's the FHA program. There are a lot of resources that have been put in place to help people buy homes. So I would discuss that a lot further with your loan officer and with your real estate professional.
And for those of you that are still watching, both of you, really appreciate you. I'm going to keep giving you shout outs because you deserve it. But one of our next interviews that I have scheduled is with a mortgage loan officer. So you'll notice that we strayed away a little bit from the financials of purchasing a home, but that was on purpose. We are going to have those specific questions to go towards an actual loan officer, and we're going to have that hopefully soon. Alrighty, Colley. So it's been a great conversation. It's been a lot of fun. We covered front and back 2 pages worth of notes. We really kept on trucking. Now, for the single listener that we have left, if they're interested in seeing, you had mentioned you have a website, if they want to see some of your resources that you have, which I assume are free.
Most of them are, yeah.
Got you. Most of them. So, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you, more about a real estate agent, see some of the resources you mentioned? Where can they find you?
Homeswithcolley.com. Simple as that. Homeswithcolley.com.
Don't even have a Twitter account?
Well, that's the best place. I'm also really active on Facebook. So,
which Facebook page?
My Facebook page is Colley Bailey New Home Specialist.
Alrighty.
Yep.
Well, alrighty. So all those links are going to be in the description below, or if you are listening to the podcast, they're still going to be in the show notes below, not necessarily the description, depending on what platform you are listening to. Well, Colley, thank you so much for everything. Now, final question.
Okay.
In case both of our watchers here, or listeners, had a fun time, would you be willing to come back?
Yeah, of course.
Well, alrighty. We hooked them, and we didn't even sign the contract. Well, Colley, thanks again for being here. Hopefully, we'll see you next time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.